You're listening to Wisdom of the Ages, the show that taps into the many expressions of universal, ancestral, and personal wisdom to ignite evolutionary consciousness.
Greetings. Hello, this is Ayn Cates Sullivan, one of the Superpower Up hosts, and you're listening to Wisdom of the Ages, where we can invite the sacred into modern-day reality. You can find out more about the show on Wisdom of the Ages, superpowerexperts.com. So have you ever wondered if it's possible to become liberated from pain and suffering? If you're interested in the journey of awakening and enlightenment, you will love this episode. We're going to be listening to one of the wisest and most accomplished people on the planet, Dr. Gabriel Cousens, who might encourage us to remove the noose of the mind from around our necks and awaken. His new autobiography is filled with wisdom, and I would like to begin with a quote from his new book. It goes like this: "Life and liberation only happen if we are willing to repeatedly disappear into the nothing and live in a way that continues to open us up to the experience of the divine presence now." So, speaking of divine presence, I would like to introduce one of my favorite people on the planet. Dr. Gabriel Cousens is known worldwide as a liberated spiritual teacher and the leading expert in live plant source nutrition. Dr. Cousens functions as a holistic physician, psychiatrist, family therapist, and cutting-edge researcher on healing diabetes naturally. His multicultural background as an ordained rabbi, an acknowledged yogi, and 4-year Native American sun dancer adds insight to his whole person enlightenment teachings. Dr. Cousens is the author of 13 books, with his 14th book, Into the Nothing, to be released soon. So welcome, Dr. Gabriel Cousens.
Well, thank you. This is really a joy to share with you. And you mentioned being relieved of pain, and this may sound really unusual for people, but I have had 2 abdominal operations done without anesthetic, simply by meditating and going into the nothing during the surgery.
I read that in your book. It was really surprising. It's not something I've ever heard anyone else talk about, but you were able to go into such deep meditation that you were able to separate yourself from the pain body. How did that work?
Well, there are different states of awareness, but there's a state in yoga called pratyahara, which is withdrawal of the senses.
Right.
And I basically went to the pratyahara state, and there was no pain.
Wow. I mean, is that
surgeons
something?
had a hard time with that. The surgeons like, "What are you doing?" You know, they wanted to talk to me. I said, "Please, just let me meditate." So they were just fascinated. But that's the way it is that people don't realize we have incredible capacities.
Yes.
And that's just an example when you say going beyond the pain. Mostly when you say go beyond the pain, it's more mental and emotional pain. And when your mind is clear and you're not attached to anything, which is what causes the pain, and you're living in a state of passionate non-attachment. People get that confused. "Oh, I'm detached, I'm separated." No, you're not separated. In the state of liberation, you're passionately involved, but you are non-attached. It's a subtlety that's very important. So you're very involved, but you're also at a state of peace with whatever goes on.
So it's interesting. Your book is called Into the Nothing, and we live in a culture where everyone wants something. Maybe they're looking for connection, but it's usually something we're looking for. So why would you call your book Into the Nothing?
Well, it's a very good question. And my fundamental liberation experience is no longer experiencing any kind of body. So often we can be in an astral body, or we different levels, or we go down the white tunnel in a near-death experience. But I'm not talking about that. I've had 3 near-death experiences. I do, yes, there's a white tunnel. I'm talking about there's no tunnel, there's no you.
Wow.
So at the deeper level of liberation, any identification with a you or I-ness dissolves, and there's only that. The divine presence, I call it eternal presence, past, present, and future, gone. And so there's not even close of an ego identification. You've just disappeared, and you've merged with God, which is what we call God merging. So the nothing is the outer experience of of God merging. There's just nothing. You disappear. You as a subtle I disappears.
So the ego, the person that we take ourselves to be is, I believe that you call it a case of mistaken identity.
That's correct. The personality, the physical and the emotional, mental, and mind is not who we are. We are the spark of God as the divine. And when you die and when you dissolve into nothing, that becomes the core understanding. It's not a theory. I call it divine behavior modification. You go there enough times that it really becomes your fundamental awareness. And that's what I'm talking about. And so you're seriously not identified with anything, even the spark of the soul.
Not even the spark of the soul. Because
Right.
I have a preference for the sparkly part of the soul, but there's something even beyond that.
That's right. So when we have the spark of the soul, we can have what we call nirvikalpa samadhi, where you dissolve into the nothing, but there's still a subtle you. Or sankalpa samadhi, you dissolve into the light, but there's still a subtle you. But this is beyond that. There is no you left. It's the real truth of who we are. There's only God.
So if there's no you left, then we become merged with God. Is that correct?
Right. And really you get the profound understanding there is only God in different variations and forms. But at that moment, into the nothing, there's only God.
That's amazing.
That is like a really profound liberation. Like it starts with the word experience, but then it becomes your understanding, because when you have it enough, it becomes your awareness. People can have very deep one-time experiences, but I'm talking about a sustained experience of that. Even though you're walking around in the body, your awareness is there's only God.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. So is this the path of holistic liberation? Is that what you're talking about?
It's the end of the path. So the question about holistic liberation, which is a way I'm kind of describing it, is a focus that we are multidimensional beings.
Mm-hmm.
We're not just spiritual beings. We're astral beings, and we're soul beings, and we're also physical beings. And they all parts work together. That's the word multidimensional. And the concept here, there's 2 levels there, is that we become liberated at every level of our beingness.
Wow.
Okay. And now, the other part of that is, well, how do you get there? And that's key to understand, is there's a yogic term called Sanatana Dharma, which means the natural way of living that takes you to liberation. So we're not talking about a technique. It's a way of life.
That's amazing. So is there how do people get in touch with you? So what's your website, and how can people come and work with you?
Right. It's drcousens.com.
That's beautiful. And do you have a newsletter they can sign up for?
They go to drcousens.com. And you could sign up for the newsletter on it, and you get a little gift, a little bonus gift. And that lets people know what's going on. But I am on pretty much all the media, internet formats. So I'm sharing 6 days a week.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad we have so much, that you're so present for us in this time, and we really, really need you. So, okay, so when we come back from this short break, we're going to talk more about holistic liberation. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Hello, everyone. This is Tonya Don Rekla, Executive Director of Superpower Experts, and we want to thank each of you for making Superpower Up the #1 podcast network for personal development and spiritual growth. Because people like you have the courage to say that mindfulness, healthy living, disrupting reality, the pursuit of consciousness, responsible entrepreneurship, and radical parenting matter. We now amass over 1 million downloads monthly in more than 90 countries. Our numbers keep growing because there are far more people willing to live divergently than mass media wants to acknowledge. For you, the change makers, the light bearers, the way showers, we say thank you. If you're ready to take the next step in your evolution, go now to superpowerexperts.com and take the Superpower Quiz. And as Neva Lee Rekla, our youngest podcaster, likes to remind us, remember, we all have superpowers and we can change the world.
Okay, we're back. You're listening to Ayn Cates Sullivan, host of Wisdom of the Ages on the Superpower Up podcast network, the #1 podcast network for personal development and spiritual growth. So today we're talking with Dr. Gabriel Cousens about holistic liberation. Welcome back, Gabriel.
Well, I'm pleased to be back, and I'm pleased to share this because thinking it as a way of life rather than as a technique changes the story. So I've broken it down to what I call the 6 foundations and 7-fold peace, which is, again, the model of holistic liberation. First, there's a physical level. We have to detox physically. We are offering spiritual fasting retreats several times a year, and using a diet that is least disruptive to the quietness of the body, which is a plant-based diet. We're talking about doing yoga or breathing exercises or Tai Chi, Qigong to expand the Qi or prana that people have. And we're talking about service and charity. Now, that's not usually mentioned, but actually I have over 100 programs in about 16 countries where we're teaching the organic, veganic way of life and also diabetes prevention. So what does that do? Well, it means we're opening our heart to other people. And so we have a connection. It doesn't mean withdrawal from the world. Okay. And that's a really good thing. The fourth is working with a spiritual teacher if you're ready. The fifth is meditating as much as possible. People can start with a half-hour meditation a day, work up to half hour twice a day, and then we'll move that up to an hour twice a day. Everybody has to work with their schedule and start to make it work in. That begins to take you more directly to the truth of who you are. The more you meditate, it's like doing push-ups, the more you can do. Okay? And then finally, there's something that working with a spiritual master, we call it awakening the spiritual energy. We call it Shaktipat. Hebrew Torah tradition, we call it Haniha. It's about everybody has the powerful spiritual energy within themselves. In yoga, they call Kundalini. It's stored its potential. And with a spiritual master in which this has been transmitted to, then that person has the ability to transmit it to others. And I'm mentioning that because that's part of what I do. My spiritual teacher, Swami Muktananda, empowered me with the energy and then instructed me to share it with as many people as possible. And so, in U.S., we have 2-3-day intensives a year. We have things in Israel. In a week or two, I'm going off to Brazil to do an extended retreat, which I've been doing on a regular basis. So it's the idea of sharing it throughout the world. So that's the 6 foundations. Now, similar to that, but a little different, is the 7-fold piece. Again, this is a way of life. It's not a technique. Okay, first, get your body healthy, which we already talked about. Work on your mind, peace with the mind. That's the meditation. And then peace with the family. And a lot of spiritual paths, they don't focus on that. But your interrelationship, I call it sacred relationship, which is what I talk about. My wife and I talk about a lot. Sacred relationship, intimacy, right relationship with your family is very, very important. Model in a bigger system beyond America, where the family's tending to break down because there's less value on that. But when we look at kind of other cultures, I've traveled to over 42 different countries and 5 different continents, and there's still respect for the family as the unit. So what do we learn in the family? We learn to be intimate. We learn how to open our hearts. It's a training of how to relate to the world. So that's a mastery. It has to happen as part of holistic liberation. Then our relationship with the community. Now, you don't have to agree with the community. Community can act this way or that way. The key is to have the right détente, the right relationship where you feel at peace, no matter what the community is doing. And then peace with all cultures. Now, from the Native American approach, we're talking about peace with the rock people, that's the living planet. Peace with the plant people, all of the green ecology. Peace with the animal world, the swimming and flying ones. And then peace with the talking world. Now, animals talk, okay? But I take it, it's history. It's the talking world that writes books that has a written quality to it. So those are all the cultures. And within that, as I have done with a Native American and all the different cultures, coming to peace with that. Now, the next one is I call spiritual ecology. How do we relate to the world, ecological world, from a spiritual point of view? The goal of which is to uplift the living planet and all the people of the living planet. Now, each one of these is the whole talk in itself, so I'm being aware that there's a limit here. People could look at my book, Sevenfold Peace, more discussion on it. And the final is peace with God. I mean, to have peace with God, of course, you have to have a certain sort of belief in God. And what we see in our society, as a psychiatrist, family therapist, is there is an increased amount of chaos because we've gone away with the foundational morality, which makes society work right. So we're creating chaos. So to be really with peace with God, we also have to play by the game plan. We call it the 10 speakings, 10 commandments. We can call it the Yoga Yama and Niyamas. We can call it the Buddha's Eightfold Path. But the point is, there are ways to act that bring peace to society on all levels. And that's what I'm talking about. So that's the 7 levels of peace and the 6 foundations. Now, when you incorporate it, we're talking about the natural way of living that brings you to liberation. Because the more you live this way, the more you wake up. There's no trick to it. And when you begin to understand, as I do my book, Into the Nothing, that every experience in our life is to help us wake up. There are no victims. There are no victimizers. We're neither of those. Every experience we have is there for only reason. It's God's gift to us to help us to wake up. So there's a shift in our orientation. Can't be victim here. Hey, what a gift. Even though it may not be pleasant, it's a gift that allows us to evolve spiritually. So within the 6 foundations, 7-fold peace, it's the attitude that whatever God does is for the best. And it's my responsibility to see the best in that situation.
Gabriel,
and elevate myself.
in your book, in your autobiography, you did something really unusual. You stated that playing football taught you everything you need to know about the spiritual path to liberation. And I thought that was an unusual take. And did you want to say any more about football and liberation?
Yeah. So in my book, the subtitle is Everything I Ever Learned About Life Came from Playing Football and Meditating. Okay. So football is a metaphor for the bumps of life. And when we go through the whole thing of football, it's a game. It's got a set of rules, just like life does. But it's a way of witnessing life because it is a game. Now, I played really intensely. I was a captain of an undefeated college football team and in the National College Football Hall of Fame. So it was a big deal for me. But with that intensity, this is the point I want to make, that every little thing matters, and I transferred to spiritual life, all the lessons were there. Okay, let's say you're injured. Well, I could say, poor me, I don't really feel like playing today. Or I could do like most of the other people on the team, poor me, and no, there's no poor me. I'm injured, I'm going to keep playing.
Right.
Because I'm in this game of life, and it's a metaphor for the game of life. So it taught me about working hard, perseverance, no matter what's going on, never giving up, and being willing to take the bumps of life and learn from them. So there are a lot of things. The book is kind of fun that way. I don't think there's ever been anything written like that. Football as a spiritual experience. It plays with the contradiction. And,
exactly, yeah.
But football is a metaphor for life. So life is a spiritual path. Playing football is an intensified spiritual path. But we're playing with the apparent contradiction, and that's the key thing to understand. So that's why I put it in there, to get people to say, well, even it applies to football.
I really liked it because my 20-year-old son could start relating to the spiritual path through this way. So that was really helpful. His eyes really lit up. So another part of the book that I really love, and in a lot of spiritual traditions, it's not about relationship, it's not about family, it's not about community. And one of the things you talk about is sacred relationship as the path to liberation, and that's just really special. I don't know if you want to share something about that.
Yeah. So I'm going to play with the football for a second, which takes us there, because you're part of a team. You're not some person living in a cave. You're part of a team. And to be an undefeated team, everybody really has to get along. And everybody's from all different backgrounds, right? And pathways and views of life. But as a team, you have to be one. Mm. So football instills you with that understanding. There has to be that one. So the same thing happens in sacred relationship, only we're talking a little bit more intense level of intimacy. So what happens in sacred relationship is that, and I'm going to say, not just at the beginning where you're working through what we call your family transferences. Everybody comes from a family, and the first 3 to 7 years, they call it the 7-year itch, but in our world, maybe it's 3 years. Things are speeding up. You end up playing out your family projections on your partner. Now, if you don't get that, it's a lot of conflict. If you get it, it's like, wow, this is coming up. This is an issue that's blocked my evolution. And now I have a chance with my spouse to examine it and let go of it. And so at one level, the sacred relationship it shows you all your personality imbalances because they show up in the relationship. That's level one. Okay. And that's good enough in itself.
Right.
I mean, wow. Okay. Just facing that, going into the relationship, knowing you are having your spouse as your spiritual teacher is a very powerful way to live.
So we don't need to.
They're the ones that can give you that feedback.
We don't need to fight with them. We just don't need to fight with them. I think I think the listeners might be interested in what a projection is or an object relation is. Like when we look at somebody, we might not be seeing them clearly, and it seems like that was part of what I learned from you with the sacred relationship aspect.
In the psychological terms, we call it transfer. So what does that mean? Well, you're a woman and you have some issues with your father, and so your husband, given the conventional heterosexual viewpoint, which is 99% of how the world was, you project your issues with father onto your husband.
Right.
Now,
so you're not seeing in other words, you're not seeing your husband, you're seeing your father overlighting your husband. So you're not really seeing him clearly.
Correct. And so the healing comes when you and your mate work out the distortion. But, your mate say, well, that's not really me. That's not what's going on. And then you get the insight, oh, God, I've now projected my father's behavior onto you.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives us an opportunity to connect with that and heal those patterns, behavioral patterns. Now, that's just level one. Level two is intimacy. And that may be the hardest frontier. Our world, we're moving away from intimacy. People rather be talking to their computers or not have a committed relationship or polyamorous, all kinds of things. The result of that is you don't have to be very intimate because sex doesn't have to be intimate. There's nothing sacred that has to happen. So that sacred relationship says, no, you are in this relationship. You are doing things with this person. You're taking risks with this person only, and you can't just opt out to a triangle relationship. Got to stay there. You can't run away. Triangles tend, I'm going to say 10. In 100% of my observation over the last 44 years as a family therapist, triangles tend to diffuse the intimacy.
Right.
Okay. And often don't work, basically rarely work, or they may work for a year or two. But the third level, once you've kind of worked out a certain level of intimacy, is the whole intimacy and vulnerability, and ultimately merging with that person, which is a precursor of merging with the one. So you have three kind of levels of going on: the psychological, the intimacy issues, fear of intimacy, fear of relationship, fear of being hurt. So you're protecting that illusory ego. And then the final step, when you're no longer in fear, which is the key, that issue in intimacy, is that you're free to merge into the one in that relationship, to merge with the other person, which is a precursor experience of merging with the one.
That's really
because
beautiful.
People are afraid of the unknown.
Mm-hmm. It is really beautiful that we can actually talk about two people coming together. I mean, a lot of people talk about Tantra, but this seems a little bit different in that there's actually a container in which two people have committed to finding out what God is together and can reflect each other enough to really evolve together. That seems like a new way of being and relating that's important.
So the traditional Tantra that we think about is sexual, right? Mm-hmm. And it doesn't really involve intimacy.
Right.
Okay, it's like faceless. But in a certain way, we could call sacred relationship personal Tantra. In other words, it's a personal relationship. You have a face, your partner has a face, and you're seeing the face of God in that person. So it's just a whole other definition of two people committed to long-term relationship in that interpersonal relationship, which could be called Western Tantra versus Eastern Tantra, where there's no face and it's kind of more sexually focused.
It's really, really lovely. So in your autobiography, you talk about your experience with Swami Muktananda, and some listeners might or might not know about this Swami, but he was I think he was one of the main Swamis that brought enlightenment to a lot of people in the West. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. He was directed by his God-merged guru, Swami Nityananda, or Sri Nityananda, he wasn't Swami, who was kind of like, only worked with a few people. He was given the mission to take this to the world, take it to the West. And so his mission was to touch hundreds of thousands of people directly, actually. I mean, Shaktipat, the awakening Kundalini, to physically touch people, with a feather or with something. So we're talking hundreds of thousands of people to awaken and kind of bring that. And that happened in the 60s, actually. So he was one of the main people to do this.
And one of the things I loved about your autobiography is that you describe your 7 years in India with it's very rare to meet somebody who's actually spent 7 years in India with an awakened master. And I was pretty impressed that you were meditating 6 hours a day, that you were the ashram psychiatrist, which must have been a trip in and of itself.
A psychiatrist and holistic physician.
Right.
Things are very weird in India. So I was also not, that's important, holistic physician. In India, they have a lot, they have a lot of sugar. And I spent a lot of time getting people to stop doing that because it made their blood sugar imbalanced. They couldn't meditate so well, so I was kind of working at different levels. But go ahead.
Well, so there's one thing that's amazing about you is that you have this very practical level. So you're a highly trained doctor and psychiatrist, and then you have this experience with Swami Muktananda, the Shaktipat experience, and suddenly your life is about enlightenment, and it seems to really change you in the autobiography. It was exciting part of the book.
It significantly changed me. Period. Didn't mean I stopped doing other things. I was still a holistic physician, but it was the most, I'm going to use the word this way, the most significant turning point in my life. And connected me with a deeper life mission. So everybody has a life mission, but you got to kind of tune into it so you're aligned with the divine will. Your will, my will is aligned with the divine will. So I would say it was the major turning point in my life.
It's beautiful. So suddenly, I don't know if this is true, but what I felt reading the book was that even though you had been raised Jewish, suddenly you're in India, and there is a connection with God that maybe you hadn't experienced before, and a merger and an awakening and enlightenment. And do you want to talk about that?
Well, I think the issue is that most of the religions today, the people who are the teachers don't have that deeper inner experience. And therefore it's hard to communicate the truth when you haven't experienced it. So I was really driven. It's like, they're not getting it. I'm not blaming anybody, but it's my responsibility to find someone. So I was looking for someone who actually could connect me to the deeper truth of who we are. And I sensed in getting interested with him was that would happen with me, and, in relationship to Swami Muktananda, which is exactly what did happen. And after that Shaktipat experience, which is was apparently pretty dramatic, 1975, when I was 33 years old, and I was with Muktananda from age 33 to 40, and he left his body. I was actually done. I had actually taken leave the day before he left his body. People didn't know he was going to die, but I had completed it. He acknowledged me as liberated. Big smiles, everything's good. And then he died 3 days later. So what I'm getting back to is it was a major shift. It is a major shift to find your highest dharma, which is your life purpose and service. So that's what happened in that. And the highest purpose is to know God. And so I was very highly motivated. People naturally only ask to meditate an hour a day. So, well, I'm meditating 6. I'm not even thinking about it. This is what I have to do. So all that was going on. I was like a bull in heat, so to speak. I was driven by the spiritual energy.
That's amazing. I wonder, I don't know if all of our listeners are going to know what Shakti Pot is. I understand it's like, well, I've had it with you actually. So it's a lovely, I felt it as a lovely rush of energy that connected me to God, was how I experienced it. But how would you define it?
So within every person, we have the spark of the divine. And classically, as I explain a little bit in the book, and my other books too, like Spiritual Nutrition, that energy is stored in its potential underneath the base chakra, or at the base of the spine. Not in the spine, but underneath. And Shaktipat can awaken it, so it begins to spiritualize the whole body and spiritualize our consciousness. So the awakened Kundalini versus the stored Kundalini is what then begins to work throughout our whole beingness to help us wake up spiritually. And then all we have to do is live that way. That's the 6 foundation, 7-fold piece. And as I designed it, and I describe it in my different books, and it's on my website, drcousens.com, it's not a specific technique. It's a way of life that anybody in the West can do. And that's the key. Anybody. You don't have to go to India like I did. My job was to take what I learned in India, that was part of it, I think, and then make it accessible for people in the West.
In your book, when you come back, several other things happen. You'd think that becoming enlightened would be enough, but no, you go on to do the sun dance ceremony and become Yellow Horse. So that's pretty massive. Also, do you want to share about that?
Sure. There is a certain tradition to become liberated in a variety of traditions. Okay. There's a famous person in the 1880s, Ramakrishna, who did that. I'm kind of a curious guy. I just felt I had visions way before I moved to Muktananda of Native Americans and of Indians and of Essenes. And I was drawn to it. It was just part of my thing, and particularly visions of Crazy Horse, and so I was drawn to do this Sundance. Now, it's kind of funny because the Native Americans and the other people doing it, it's like, what, you're a vegan? So, you don't want any buffalo stew? What's the matter with you? Which was very funny. But it turned out it was blazingly hot out, maybe 110 degrees. And by the end, you're supposed to go 4 days without food or water. Well, by the end of the 4 days, I was the only one who went without food or water. So people started to change their opinion. So this went on for actually all 4 years. So by the time the 4th year came, a lot of people started to get interested in being plant source only, which I thought kind of very humorous. Mm-hmm. And it stopped, joking or teasing. And the 4th year, I did what's called the Eagle Dance, where you stand from sunrise to sunset. There were 18 people did it. I was the only one who completed it. And I have to admit, I was having a really good time. So
interesting.
But, people were into suffering. It's like, this is great. And, oh, well, you're also attached to the tree with 2 hooks through your chest.
Oh.
So that's fine. You're standing there, and it's kind of
was that painful, or were you able to shift your consciousness like you did before?
Yeah, I was able to shift my consciousness, and after a while, it wasn't particularly painful.
Interesting.
I didn't suffer with this whole process, even though this is really interesting, and this will help people understand live food a little bit. I was the only one that didn't get sunburned. Now, Native Americans have darker skin. There were some African Americans there. There were about 60 people sun dancing, 18 people doing the eagle dance. And I was the only one to be there and never left the field. So I was majorly in the sun. Why didn't I get sunburned? I mean, I really didn't get sunburned. And I began to realize that my body was eating the sun. That
your body was eating the sun? Is that what you said? Yeah. Your body?
That's exactly what I did. So
yeah.
I have eaten so much of the live food that my body had taken over some of the ability to take the sun in directly from the live food, plant-based food. It had been somewhat transmitted to me. So I was able to actually get a direct transmission of that energy, not even to go through plants. Now, that seems weird, but how do you do that and not get sunburned? Well, because I'm eating the sun. I'm not fighting the sun. Now, I later, because I was like, how did this happen? And there's a cancer treatment center, Joanna Budwig. She's no longer alive, but basically, she observed that when she put people on live food, they could be out in the sun 4 times longer without getting sunburned. She didn't have a whole theory about it, but okay. So now we have 2 examples of that, if that makes sense. These are people with cancer. They could be 4 times longer, that's what she says, without getting sunburned. So it has to do with our ability to live off the light directly. So what happened to me, which is really a teaching, and I didn't get depleted. Okay, I'm without food and water, standing in the sun all day. I got energized. By the 4th day, I had more energy than the 2nd day. So something was going on that I'm being energized,
That is amazing.
Yeah, and it was a teaching. So again, everything we do is a teaching. I had no idea that was going to happen. I mean, wasn't my awareness, but my goodness, it happened. So that's my Sundance experience. Each year was a different experience. And that, as a result, my Sundance leader, Cam Nightchase, said that goes back to the Hornship clan and really to Sitting Bull, because one of our clan was the shaman for Sitting Bull. So I got accepted. Not that I even thought about it. He just did it. He didn't even ask me, to be honest with you. He just sit down, and I got initiated into the Hornship clan and that whole lineage, high horse lineage, and that kind of healing lineage. And he made me a clan leader with the name Tasuka Hinzi, Yellow Horse.
Oh, wow.
So but I'm having a good time. Don't misunderstand. You got Pierce, you got this. I'm one of the teachings I have is let's approach God with love and joy. Have a good time.
Yeah.
Whatever is happening. That's really my kind of teaching.
So, Gabriel, after all of this, you went into, you became enlightened with Muktananda, then you come back and you have this experience, become a yellow horse, and then there's this 3rd tradition that happens, where you decide to become a rabbi and establish the Essene order. So
what happened is that, again, I enjoy doing all this stuff, right? So about a year after I left India, I did a 40-day fast. And at the end of those 40 days, a little voice rang out and said, you need to go back to your roots. Oh, okay. And so I hadn't been focusing on my Jewish roots at all. So when the voice of God speaks, you really need to pay attention. Okay? The first voice was when I got Shakti Papa Muktananda, and the voice said, you need to learn to eat and live in a way that supports the Kundalini. Well, I've done that. I have my Rainbow Green Life food cuisine, the diet that best supports spiritual energy. Good. Now it's like, you have to go back to your roots. And the message implied is you have to share that so people can begin enlivening their understanding of the Torah. So a lot of people call it Old Testament. So that's what I did. I kind of did it a little reluctantly, but when that voice rings out, you really do have to pay attention.
Okay.
So that's a key. And so it took me back in a variety of ways. I found several rabbis who could begin to understand a little bit about what I was talking about. One rabbi, Gershon Winker, put it this way. He said, I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm willing to work with you and kind of translate that understanding into Torah. So one of my books is Torah as a Guide to Enlightenment. So I go through the Torah, again, when people go to Old Testament, and I point out all the teachings are there. Wow. And so in Torah, there's really 4 levels of understanding. Just a straight literal, then there's a metaphorical, and then there's kind of a life experience type thing, and then we call Sod. And Sod is kind of more metaphysical. So lower Sod is what we call Kabbalah, which I'm not super interested in because it's still metaphysical. Upper Sod is the direct knowing. And so there's a term. I uncovered all these terms that were being used. Akdut, the direct understanding. So it was all there. And it just because people weren't living at that level of inner experience, people weren't talking about it, at least publicly. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying some people didn't know this because there's some of these hidden Kabbalistic groups, where some of it's taught, okay, maybe. But that's what happened. It's like, okay, your mission here is to show it's all laid out in the Torah, Old Testament, this whole spiritual path that you experienced in India and so forth. There's nothing new here. So that's what I did with that book. It's like, okay, Torah is a guide to enlightenment. It's like, okay, this is now the Western Torah-based understanding.
So in your autobiography, you weave these 3 traditions, and then it's almost as if a new path emerges, which is, would you call it your own path, your own journey to holistic liberation?
Well, I don't want to take ownership because
true. This would be a self, which would.
Yeah. So what I would say is, each one has an insight, it has an angle of understanding. Okay, the Native Americans, that's a lot about courage. Okay, and spiritual life means you're willing to go through hardship. So that's part of what that was about. And then the Torah understanding, the yogic understanding, they all have their insights. So what I began to do is like, how do I make this accessible to the general public? And I began to take the kind of key insights that were more unique to each tradition, and I put it into a way of life. Okay, 6 foundations and 7-fold peace are actually a way of life that leads to liberation. That's for people living in the West,
right?
And that's kind of what I did. So, and that's what I call, holistic liberation. It is holistic. It's physical, and it works with the emotional, works with the intimacy, works with the mind, and works with the spirit. So I don't think I created anything new, but I created a synthesis of not only all these, but an overview to see that we're working at all these different levels. And the idea is to become liberated on all these different levels. And that naturally, through grace, we got to talk grace. It's not just your takes liberation.
I think that's kind of exciting because, sorry, Gabriel, but it's so exciting because, a lot of people get caught up in religious structures. I think even in your book, you said all religions are a lie. Did you actually say that?
No, I said holy lies.
Oh, okay, holy lies. Because it's
why? Because that structure could take you to a place where then you could wake up a little bit.
So the structure holds you for a little bit, and then there's something else about direct knowing, correct? Where you're having
which
your own.
The structure can't give you. The structure can't give you that.
So at a certain point, the religious structure has to fall away. But after it's held you for a while, then it falls away once he's maybe a child being born. It needs the mother. It needs the umbilicus for a while, and then eventually it no longer needs that. Okay,
but let's say it a different way. I just took a tour in Israel with my daughter and my two granddaughters. I have three granddaughters, my two granddaughters. And we had a fantastic time. Now, I didn't go away from my daughter, Heather. We just got closer and closer. I didn't go away from my grandchildren. We got closer. We basically, and her husband was there too. We basically shared one room as we were doing this tour. You see what I mean?
Wow.
So we never leave our parents. I mean, people do. I understand that. But we are multi-cultural, multi-generational in the way it's all over the world. That's the way it's been.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm never living I happen to be close with my children, but I don't happen to be close. That's just part of what is. Because there's a value. There's a continual value. Okay, now I'm a grandparent. So there's a grandparent, there's a parent, there's the grandchildren. It all, each has its role. And I talk about that in my more conscious parenting. So that's how I kind of see that, if you see what I mean. Now, we're not needing it like we did as a child, which is what you were saying. But I'm saying don't give it up just because you can strong enough to be independent. We are interdependent beings. We are multidimensional, multi-generational, interdependent beings. And that's what I mean partly by the holistic liberation, which I call the family part. I was at peace with the family. And the idea is to be at peace with every level of all the different generations.
Right. And that's one of the things I just loved about your book, because if you think about, the traditional Hindu path, Buddhism, actually, particularly Catholicism, you leave the family, you leave relationship, you become celibate, you basically cut yourself off from life. And when I was reading your book, I thought, gosh, this is actually the opposite. It's holistic because it actually is inviting presence into. I mean, a lot of times in the West we forget the importance of the body. We've forgotten clearly the importance of the earth. And here's this invitation to cleanse the body, to move into right relationship with the earth, to love your spouse, not leave your spouse, but learn to love your spouse and see yourself reflected as God in your spouse. That's beautiful. And then to continue to open up to the divine in a way that's unique in your own, and I guess eventually the you will disappear, but as an essence, this sparkly, beautiful essence until you experience the nothing. It's really beautiful, Gabriel.
Well, you've articulated very elegantly, so thank you. And that peace with the family is a multi-generational viewpoint. And if we look at all cultures, I'm not really saying anything new. I mean, when I was in Nigeria doing my diabetes programs and different things, I gave a shamanic Shabbat for 13 different tribes that this person who's now king presided over. He called them over, we did this Shabbat. And I also gave Shakibat to
nice.
from all 13 tribes. But this is the think that's fun. So the prior king, his father, he's 111 years old, okay? And I saw him a few days later, and he was still flying high from the Shaktipat.
I love it.
But get the idea of the sharing, the multi-generational sharing. So in that one instance, I was able to give that transmission of the divine energy to Grandpa, to him, and to also his children. Because it's tribal, but it's good tribal. Not all tribal is bad.
Yeah.
So, because when you honor the holistic family, the multi-dimensional generational family, you empower everybody.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So if the listeners are really excited about this and they want to start with you, they want to start this journey to holistic liberation, how would they begin?
Well, start by going to drcousens.com and getting on our mailing list. And you just do that, the mailing list pops up. That kind of outlines where I'm doing the workshops, teachings. I have the newsletter goes out at least weekly. And then you start to tune in the fact that I'm teaching every day. Okay, we're doing it on Facebook, we're expanding it, so it's on all the different internet systems. So we have that going on. So all that's available, but the getting onto the newsletter kind of tunes you into what's getting on, where the workshops are, when this is being talked about, and so forth. And where all my previous talks, which are over 300 different videos that are out there.
That's amazing.
So, a lot of people could get, they could get a hold of some of the teachings. There is no substitute for some impersonal connection. And that's where we look at our 3-day intensive here, or in Israel, we're doing a lot. And also, as I said, going to Brazil, it's a 18-day intensive. So I'm available, but the newsletter tells you what's going on, and you can kind of get that. drcousens.com. Make it real simple, and get on the newsletter. Get on the email list for the newsletter, and then you're constantly being updated. And it's really important to at least one time have that physical, personal connection. Now, like in Brazil, not everybody from Brazil can come here or be there. It's possible to give Shaktipat over the internet. It's not what I will do that in some things, but the point is, more importantly, in person is the key. I also have a kind of what I call the Shakti group, where we meet once a month, where people who are really committed are part of, and they get their spiritual questions answered by me. It's still an internet design, so everything is kind of going more to the internet, which is a different way. I mean, in 1943, when I was born, there was no internet. Oh, there was no TV.
Right.
So I didn't see a TV until I was 8 years old. So it's kind of funny. But we keep adjusting to what's going on, and now we're into more of a internet world, and I'm sure that will change too. And that's how I am reformulating things. So I'm not as in person. In a year, I will be doing the diabetes healing program in Israel. At least once a year, I've got that kind of set up. And I may go to twice a year. That'll be the only place in the world I'm doing it. Right now, it's Brazil and Israel. But in Israel, I serve in our last fast. There were people from 14 different countries. So we have all of Europe coming. And so all those are ways to reach me in person. Okay? And that's the key. There needs to be, not that there has to be, but it's way better if there's at least one personal energetic transmission.
That would be amazing. So is there a practice that you can leave us with, or some words of wisdom? What would you like to leave us with today?
So I'm not going to leave you, okay?
How would you like to join up with us today?
Okay. Because know the oneness, we're not ever, and I'm not trying to one up that. It's a way of thinking. Okay, so the first practice is that way of thinking, that we really are one. And how do we best understand it? Meditate. And a meditation technique that I use, which was given to me after a 21-day water fast in 1995, is a simple one. You breathe. It's using the name of God that Moses got from the burning bush. Yod and then breath. Hey on that breath. Wah and then breath. Hey on that breath. And you simply do that till your mind's quiet, and then you're in meditation. It's a little bit more. You got to be able to sit quietly and witness your thoughts and see what happens. A lot of times people will have this spontaneous awakening of Kundalini. So that's the technique. Meditate using that mantra, the name of God Moses got from the burning bush, and let it kind of focus your mind. Okay. Now, the blessing I like to give, why not do both, right? There's a teaching, but what about a blessing? So
Absolutely. Yeah.
May everyone be blessed, that we become inspired to know our oneness with the divine. And may everyone be blessed that we're able to take these simple ways to enhance our oneness with the divine, which, and I bless you with the discipline to be able to do that. It doesn't just come out of the blue. You have to have that commitment. So may you be blessed with that commitment to work towards more continually experiencing oneness with the divine. And may everyone be blessed with ever-increasing love, ever-increasing joy, and in this world, ever-increasing peace. Amen. Aho, what we would say is Om Atakiwasan. Shalom, shalom, shalom.
That's just beautiful. I'm feeling that blessing just pass through me. It's just lovely.
Okay, well,
Thank you.
You are doing a great job. You did a great interview. I want to really thank you for that. And people are very lucky to have you putting this program on.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, maybe you'll come back on a show again sometime. I think there's lots more we could go into, but that's all the time.
I'm always happy to do this. You seem to be particularly interested in sacred relations as a spiritual path. That's something I can speak hours on.
Oh, that would be great. I would love to do a show on that. I think it's something that's so important for people. Yes, let's just plan to do that. I'm excited about that already. So, well, thank you again. Thank you for being on the show. And thank you to all of our listeners as well. May your lives be filled with light and blessings. You've been listening to Ayn Cates Sullivan, host of Wisdom of the Ages. Goodbye for now.
Are you ready to discover your superpowers? Go now to superpowerexperts.com and take the superpower quiz today.